CENTS would like to thank the American College of Bankruptcy and the American College of Bankruptcy Foundation for sponsoring this event. CENTS does not endorse any of the ads or videos from sources outside of CENTS that pop up before, after, or during the CENTS video. Please watch out for scams.
Hi, welcome everyone. As you're joining, make sure you're muted and please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. I want to go over a couple accessibility items. To view the captions, you will click on the menu arrow on the bottom of your Zoom. There's a bar at the bottom that will say show captions, and you can choose from showing the subtitles or the full transcript or both, and you may adjust the size of the captions if you wish. You can also hide the captions if you don't wish to see them. Our presenters would love to hear from you throughout with your questions and have this be interactive. So please do feel free to put questions in the chat box as we go, or use the hand raise function in Zoom. And there will be kind of times when the presenters will pause and respond to questions. So if we don't get to it right away, we'll try to make sure we get to all questions. You'll see we have ASL interpreters who are spotlighted. We're recording the presentation, and you'll receive a link to it afterwards and can also share it with colleagues. And I just wanted to give a warm welcome to all of you who are here today with us. A number of you are in the early support for infants and toddlers workforce, or your school district providers, fellow King County or state partners, and financial wellness providers. And so a lot of folks who, who are doing public service. And so we're really excited that you're here and hope this is helpful, and really thankful for the presenters that are here today. And I'm going to pass it to Tony.
All right, I unmute. Hey, everybody. My name's Tony Leahy. I'm the director of CENTS. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and as it says in the slide, our mission is to help people improve their financial health. We are thrilled to be offering this presentation, and we're thrilled to be partnering with the Financial Empowerment Network and the King County Developmental Disabilities and Early Childhood Supports Division. So thank you for helping us promote this event. Also really thankful for our speakers. And yeah, I don't want to take too much time, so I will just throw it to Jennifer.
Great, thank you, Tony and Debbie. And welcome everyone. I'm so excited that there are so many of us here today. Really nice to see you all or to meet you all. I do want to take just a brief opportunity to talk a little bit about the Financial Empowerment Network, because I know for many of you, we may not be a familiar organization. So I want to tell you just for a moment about what we do. So the Financial Empowerment Network envisions communities where low and moderate income individuals and families are able to achieve financial well-being. And we do that through partnerships that support access to affordable, effective, and relevant services, products, and resources. So what does that mean? We don't provide direct services, but rather we work with providers across sectors who are working on financial wellness issues. I like to say we are the financial educators of the financial educators. So we have two big initiatives that we run. First is financial empowerment integration. And that's really about helping providers increase their ability and capacity to offer financial wellness services. So typically we work with nonprofit social service partners. We know that for many of us, the biggest barrier to offer support to our clients around their financial situation is our own financial knowledge and comfort with these topics. So we're here to provide support across the spectrum, no matter folks' level of understanding of personal finances. Our goal is to increase your knowledge and provide you with resources and tools so that you're more comfortable and confident in providing that information to your clients or community members. We do this in a few ways. We offer free monthly workshops, which are virtual, like this one today. Our next workshop is actually a 3-part series focused on disability access. You can register at the link there, or I'll drop it in the chat in just a moment when I'm not talking. In addition, that QR code will take you to our website where you can find links to recordings and materials from past workshops. So most of our workshops are recorded and you can go back and watch them if you've missed them. We do a few other things. We host a financial coaches networking group, a foreclosure prevention work group, and we're working on updating our website to have current updated resources and information around financial wellness, including a statewide directory of organizations that provide financial wellness services. So stay tuned for that coming soon. The other big piece of work that we do is Bank On. We are the lead organization for Bank On Washington. And Bank On is a national initiative that was developed to help connect folks to safe, affordable, and functional bank accounts. These accounts are low cost, low barrier, and they're really designed to meet the needs of folks who have limited or perhaps troubled history with banking. There are over 240 Bank On certified accounts across the country, including 13 here in Washington State. And if you scan the QR code, you can find the list of accounts that are offered here. And then there's a couple of links there to other information. So if you are interested in getting connected with a financial institution to help support your clients' needs, please let me know. I'm happy to chat more about that. And the last thing I will say is that Bank On Washington convenes an annual forum each fall. This year's forum is October 24th and 25th in Yakima, and we're really excited about continuing the conversation around financial access and supporting the financial wellness of the most marginalized and excluded communities across the state. So if you're interested, registration is open. Take a look. Let me know if you have questions. We would love to see you in Yakima. These slides are available on the link to where all of the documents are. I will drop it in the chat again shortly, but you can follow us on social media. We're online. This is all of our information. All right. So with that, I would like to move us into why everyone is really here, which is to learn more about managing student loan debt. Thank you to Julia Kellison and Latifa New, who are both student loan experts and have worked with clients for years to help them overcome financial challenges. Latifa is a debtor-creditor attorney at Sweet Law, and Julia is a consumer attorney at Northwest Justice Project. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to both of you. Thank you so much, Julia and Latifa, for being here today.
And she's always nice to be here. And I wonder if everyone else can make sure that you are muted so we don't have too much background noise. And Julia, I think you're up first. Uh-oh. Julia, you're muted. There you go.
Thank you. All right, thanks for having us. My name is Julia Kellison. I am a legal aid attorney at Northwest Justice Project. We're a statewide legal aid organization in Washington State, operating out of 18 offices. And I work in Seattle and coordinate a weekly debt clinic at which we do see student loan issues. So pleased to be here with my co-presenter, Latifa New, and thanks for having us. So if we could move ahead to the next slide, please. And the slide after that. So Latifa and I want to make sure everyone knows that the information we're providing today is current as of today, because including the active space that student loans have been in the last several months, forms, policies, and laws change. And it's really important to refer to the resources we're going to refer to, and you'll see on our slides as you implement your student loan strategy going forward, because things change so quickly. And the resources we are pointing you to have updated forms and policies. Just really, really important to keep that in mind. Thanks. Next slide, please. So some of these resources, my favorite student loan resource, my go-to site is the National Consumer Law Center's Student Loan Borrower Assistance.org. I hand this website out like candy. It's sort of the A to Z of student loans, what to look for if you're taking out a loan, really great comparison charts, pro-con lists of the options, how to get out of trouble if you're in default, what are the repayment plans, what are the discharge options, cancellation options. It's a really, really terrific website that I give to clients, friends, colleagues all the time. And there are several websites like that, but this happens to be my favorite. The Department of Education has information and tools at www.studentaid.ed.gov. And there's a new student loan, Department of Education website that you can subscribe to for updates, which is new on the scene at ed.gov/subscriptions. We're pleased that in Washington State several years ago, the legislature passed a bill that included a student loan advocate. Her name is Stephanie San Pedro, and she runs the Washington Student Loan Advocate office or program, and they handle complaints and really provide wonderful services for student loan borrowers in Washington State. So check that out at wsac.wa.gov/loan-advocacy. Next slide, please. So some pretty sobering statistics. There's at least $1.5 trillion of outstanding student loan debt in the US. And the Seattle Times recently, in an article last week, noted that in Washington, as of March of 2022, there were almost 783,000 residents in Washington that held $28.2 billion, that's a B, in outstanding federal student loans. And almost 50% of this group have federal loans over $20,000, and 77% of those borrowers are under 50 years old.
And Julia, I thought the interesting thing about that statistic as well was that that suggests that 23% of folks are 50 and over. This is a more a grayer problem than we really understand at first glance.
Absolutely. Thanks for noting that, Latifa. And crazily enough, there are more than 100 people with federal student loans of more than $1 million. This is a widespread problem. It can be a smaller dollar problem, but it can be a really big dollar problem as well. And we hope to give you resources to help wherever you are in this issue or wherever your clients are. Next slide, please. So in terms of types of student loans, student loans are either federal student loans or private student loans. And federal loans in general, and we'll go into a little bit more detail later. Federal loans are direct loans and other loans held by the Department of Education. They are FFEL program loans that were guaranteed by the federal government. And in general, about 80% of student loans out there are federal loans. Private loans are usually made by a private bank or other lender. They can be sold, securitized, or held by the lender. And they have very different options and challenges than federal loans. In general, for my low-income clients, it's really more beneficial to have federal loans because of the various repayment options, the discharge options, the cancellation options if you hit a hard patch and you can't make the payments. The federal government has vast collection powers. They don't need to sue you. They can do an administrative wage garnishment or grab your tax refund, but in general, they're way more beneficial than private loans. And private loans, they can't just take your money, they have to sue you first, but they don't have to have, and they often don't have repayment options and discharge options. So they're much tougher for when you hit a hard patch and can't make a payment. So again, we'll go into more detail later. Next slide, please. So it does matter what type of loan you have, because that's how we figure out what your relief options are and what we can do to problem solve. As I mentioned, federal loans have lots of different tools for managing payments. If your income goes up or down, they're income sensitive repayments. They have forgiveness options if you become disabled and cannot pay your loans back. And most of the 2022 policies that we're going to talk about today apply to federal direct loans. Private loans, again, can really differ by the terms and vary by lender and loan contract. Really important to read that loan contract to know what your rights are before you sign on to a private loan. And today we're really focusing mainly on the 2022 changes in federal student loan policy. Next slide, please. So how do you determine what kind of loan you have? For federal loans, you can go to the studentaid.gov website here or call that number, 800-4-FED-AID. If you're on the website, you log in with your username and password, or have the person at the end of the phone call it on 800-4-FED-AID help you figure out and get into the loan database to find out what types of federal loans you have, and therefore what types of relief options are available to you. Unfortunately, there's no central database for private loans. A good way to see if you have them could be on your credit report. And the website listed here is the federal website that you can go to get a free copy of your credit report from the three major credit bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, at www.annualcreditreport.com. And you can also get those mailed to you. It's a really great website, whether you're dealing with student loans or not, and you want to check for your private loans on there. A cosigner definitely indicates a private loan, and we'll talk about cosigner issues today as well. All right, next slide. So in the world of federal student loans, if you have a direct loan, the US government is your creditor. And most new federal loans are direct loans. FFEL loans are no longer made. They were made and held by private lenders and backed by the federal government, but they're still considered federal loans. They may not be given COVID forbearance. Latifa, let me know if there's anything you want to add there. And some that are held by the Department of Education did get forbearance from the COVID era pause that this administration put on repayment. Anything you want to add, Latifa?
No, not so much. It is a bit of a confusing distinction, but generally, if someone thinks they have a federal loan, but they did not get the COVID forbearance with the no payments, no interest, that indicates that your federal loan is an FFEL loan. And we'll talk about how to sort of pivot on that fact here later in the presentation.
Okay, next slide, please. Federal loans are managed by servicers, which include the following servicers here: Mohila, Navient, and Nelnet, and there are others. And defaulted federal student loans generally go to a place called the Default Management Group or private debt collectors. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there's the highs and lows of federal loans are a really big array of repayment plans that can be limited to a percentage of your income through income-driven repayment, as well as the defined forgiveness options and discharge options. Again, disability discharge is one that I see pretty frequently. The lows can be the really vast collection powers the federal government has if you don't pay. Unlike private lenders, as I mentioned, they don't have to sue you to take your money to repay the loan if you're in default. They can do an administrative wage garnishment or grab your tax refund. And dealing with the federal bureaucracy can be slow and cumbersome. So a couple of the highs and lows of federal loans. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of good news about federal loans in 2022. Many of the changes that have happened this year do benefit the borrower. We've had 2+ years of payment and interest freeze due to the pandemic. There's the public service loan forgiveness, which has been around for a while, but really bottled up for years, is now far more a pipeline that's become far more widely open and granting the forgiveness that people have been waiting for in big ways. The income-driven repayment recount and new payment plan we'll be talking about. As many of you may have heard, there's been this, there's a proposed balance write-off of up to $20,000, and the $20,000 applying to Pell Grant recipients. That's should be coming online shortly. Borrower defense to repayment is a defense available to students that attended schools that cheated them, essentially. And that's a much more robust defense to repayment now, and some good news there, and improvement in the disability discharge arena. And I'll let you take it from here, Latifa.
Right. So this is that was kind of a roadmap to what we're going to be talking about, because those are the main changes that we're seeing that are benefiting borrowers. And so I'm going to jump right in talking about something that everyone's pretty excited about or interested in, motivated to learn more about the proposed balance reduction. Next slide, please. So a couple of weeks ago, this is really fresh news, the administration proposed a balance write-off for qualifying federal loan borrowers of up to $20,000 per borrower. Oops, did we lose the slides? I'll put my hard copy in front of me. There's an income component to that. So the write-off is intended to benefit people who are earning or who earned up to $125,000 individually as far as their AGI, or up to $250,000 in terms of their household AGI in either 2020 or 2021. So it's worth going back, laying eyes on your tax return, seeing what your numbers are in either of those years to see whether you may qualify. Next slide, please. The way this is intended to work, oops, do not disturb. The way this is intended to work is if a person did not receive Pell Grants for their undergraduate work, they will receive up to $10,000 in balance write-off. And up to means if you owe $9,000, then your write-off would be $9,000. If you owe more than $10,000, then the last $10,000 is eliminated. For those who received Pell Grants or a Pell Grant during their undergraduate work, they would be eligible for up to $20,000 write-off. If you're not sure if you received a Pell Grant, studentaid.gov will enable you to log into your system, see all of your loans, and also see whether any Pell Grants were dispersed to you. So you can determine what kind of benefits you might be online for. Next slide, please. This relief is intended, at first when it was announced, there was an indication that it would go to all federal loans. What we're seeing now is that the administration is pulling back slightly, partly in response to certain attacks on the program, indicating that this relief will go to borrowers with direct loans, or will be applied to direct loans. As you'll recall from slide 6, way back when, we learned that the direct loans are the ones where the Department of Education is your lender. Okay, so if you log on and you look at your materials and you find out that you don't have direct loans, you are eligible to consolidate your debt into a direct loan now in order to get yourself online for this $10,000, $20,000 write-off. And we'll talk in much greater detail about consolidation later in this presentation. The administration has indicated that it's going to release information about how to seek this relief in early October. That was reiterated today in a press release, so we'll be looking for some kind of utility in the next couple of weeks. They're indicating there's not going to be a proof of income component to it, so people will be able to use this utility, access the utility, request it, and simply self-certify income. And I imagine there would be some sort of auditing of a small number of the applicants just for due diligence purposes, But for the most part, you don't need to dig out your tax return and send it somewhere. It will just be about saying, hey, I'm here and I'd like that benefit. We're advising people that if you want to see the write-off reflected in your balance before loans go back into repayment in 2023, January 2023, it would be worthwhile to go ahead and avail yourself of this benefit when it opens up. However, that's not necessary. Everything we're hearing is that the program to ask for this benefit will be open until the end of 2023. So if for some reason now is not the right time, I was talking to someone a couple of days ago who wanted to see certain things happen to his balance before he requested that benefit. So his strategy is to wait a few months, and you too could do that. But in order to get the write-off before you're due to make payments in January, act soon. Now, fair warning, this is a controversial policy, and there's already been a lawsuit or so filed to try to stop this benefit from coming down. We don't know how that's going to shake out, and so I'm cautiously optimistic it will roll out and we'll, lower and middle income people will see this benefit, but keep an eye on the news so we can respond accordingly.
Latifa,
Yes.
we have a question. Is debt relief specific to undergraduate degrees?
No, it's for whatever balance you have out there that's in the form of direct loans. So it doesn't matter for what kind of degree. It could be technical school, undergraduate, graduate, and in fact, it would appear that it can be for Parent Plus loans as well. So that would be, if I have a Parent Plus loan, it's not for my degree at all. It's for my child's degree, but those would also be eligible for this relief. Are there any other questions on that?
No, that's it so far.
Great. All right. Next slide. Okay. The next thing, sorry, I have a cold. Good thing we're not in person. The next exciting program we wanted to talk about is Public Service Loan Forgiveness Waiver, which I think should be of great interest to a lot of the folks here, because as people were coming into the waiting room and introducing themselves, they saw that there are a lot of us who are working for public sector or 501c3s. So by all means, commit this to memory. And if that doesn't apply, if this material doesn't apply to you, pass the information along, because here's the first takeaway, a big takeaway, is that the PSLF waiver is going to close. There's a deadline at the end of October. Next slide, please. October 31st, 2022. So to fully understand the waiver, what's happening right now for public service loan forgiveness, it's worth understanding the program in general as it existed before the waiver and as it's going to exist again as of November 1st, 2022. Public service loan forgiveness is a program that offers unlimited tax-free forgiveness, even if you're in the $1 Million Club, after 120 qualifying, or I should say eligible payments. So that's a great way to give back as a public servant and also put your student loans behind you after 10 years of service. There are 3 things that have to be in place in order to get credit, to get eligible payments accumulated toward that 120. Those 3 things are, first, qualifying employment. That means full-time employment, defined as 30 hours or as set forth by your employer per week in either any government function, 501c3, or certain other public service work. So that's the first thing. The second thing is qualifying loans, direct loans. We learned previously that in the federal system, there are direct loans and certain other types of loans. You have to have direct loans to have eligible payments toward this program. Third, qualifying full on-time payments under certain payment plans. That would include the income-driven repayment plans that we will be talking about later, listed here, or the 120-month standard repayment. So you're looking at this and you can probably see where there are traps for the unwary. Maybe raise your hand if you can see where smart people might miss this target, right? All right, next slide, please. Right, and so you saw it. There are folks who missed this target, who missed their qualifying payments because either they had the wrong kind of loans, such as FFEL loans, or they made payments under the wrong payment plan, They were making payments under the payment plan that the government asked them to pay, but it was not one of these specific programs, and so they weren't getting credit. So that was a failure in implementation over the last 15 years of this program, and there were a lot of folks who did their service and found that they were off track for getting relief. Next slide, please.
So we have some at a good time for you. We have some throwback questions about the $10,000 loan forgiveness. Just letting you know when.
Oh, okay, thanks. Let's charge through public service loan forgiveness, and then we'll do a little question component here in a few minutes.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Okay, so under the waiver, I'll just call it the waiver, for a limited time, borrowers can get credit for the past periods of repayment, even if they had the wrong loans, right? They were working, they had FFEL loans, and so they previously were shut out. So information here, studentaid.gov. Let's go to the next slide. And the way that's done is if you have non-qualifying loans, which would generally be FFEL loans or Perkins loans, you need to seek a direct loan consolidation. And I'm saying immediately because you need to have your consolidation filed by the end of the day, October 31st, 2022. Recently, the administration made it clear that simply applying for the consolidation is sufficient by that deadline. We don't need to see the consolidation through by that deadline, so that's a relief. But why wait, right? Apply if that's you, see what kind of loans you have, and then apply online at studentaid.gov through the online portal. Or the other way to do it is to obtain a current copy of the consolidation application, which is available various places, including the Student Loan Borrower Assistance.org website that Julia recommended. And you can fill it out just with a pencil and pen and upload it as the other options. You either do it online or in hard copy. Next slide, please. So what is this thing called a loan consolidation? We'll be talking about consolidation quite a few times during this program. So let's stop for just one slide and talk about what it is, because there are sometimes questions about that specifically. A direct loan consolidation is, you can think of it as similar to a refinance where you stay within the federal student loan system. You roll multiple loans, you've got your FFELs, your Perkins loans from undergraduate and graduate school, or even one loan that's not a direct loan, into a new bundle of direct loans where you have a new obligation as between you and the Department of Education. The interest rate, this question comes up often, is essentially unchanged based on the average interest rate, a weighted average is what you'd say, of the existing federal loans that go into the new loan. So for better or for worse, you're still going to have the same loan, the same overall interest rate for your federal loans. And at this point, given all the policies that we've seen under the new administration, the current administration, there is no downside to consolidating now. So if you're holding back for some reason, maybe ask me your question now, but the answer is going to be, just do it. This is a good time to consolidate. Okay, next slide, please. Back to PSLF. Okay, once you have direct loans, or maybe you already had direct loans, you're going to fill out an employer certification form that covers all of your previous qualifying employment. Since 2007, when public service loan forgiveness came into existence, and while you had loans. So if you've only been in repayment since 2012, that's the relevant period. But if you've been working in public service and paying on your loans or carrying your loans since before 2007, go all the way back to October 2007. So you're going to find your employment certification form online. Next slide, please. You can either use the Department of Education's PSLF help tool, which is a way that it's a utility that I haven't had a lot of experience with, but you enter your employer's information and it will generate a certification form, which you can then print and bring to your past employer or current employer. Or you can obtain a PDF also online and just fill it out. Next slide, please. This is the front page of the employment certification form. I just want to go through it. Sometimes people have questions. Your basic information here at the top about you. And then people say, what are they asking for in section 2? I think section 2 is very strangely worded, so it's worth laying eyes on. In most cases, we're going to check the first box. I want to find out how many qualifying payments I have made, or if my employer is a qualified employer. In a way, I don't think that captures what we're doing here, but I think that's the one you check. It ultimately, it doesn't really matter. What really matters is what's on the next page. So next slide, please. This is the other side. It's the side that you and your employer will fill out and that certifies that you've been doing service work. Your name and social at the top for sure, so that the form stays together and is processed timely. You or your employer can fill out this next section, section 3, with the information about your employment and about your employer and why they qualify. And then your employer must sign the bottom section, section 4, and a hack, a word to the wise. It has to be either a wet ink signature or it can be a scanned signature. But if it's something like an S/S or a DocuSigned type signature, that will be kicked back by the servicer, MOHELA. So don't do that. Next slide, please. All right, some more. You're going to take your one or more certification or certifications from however many employers you had and submit them to MOHELA. MOHELA is a servicer that is taking over for Fed loan servicing to process the public service loan forgiveness applicants. So here's information. Maybe we can drop that into the resources section that's going to go out to folks, just saying where you're going to send this form. If you've done the hard copy, you've got it in your hand, I'm advising people fax it and maybe mail it with USPS tracking, because this is high stakes stuff and you want it to get in the pipeline and you want to get credit. If you're not already with MOHELA as your servicer, your loans will be transferred to MOHELA. You should start to get mail and email from MOHELA. And eventually you'll see a list of all your qualifying payments appear on their website. And it's a very nice website, real upgrade. The payments might show up in batches. So first you might only see 6 months show up and you'll say, what? I certified 9 years. Why 6 months? Well, it's because they're doing dribs and drabs. And eventually, if all things work as they should, you'll get, everything will show up. And if some things are showing up as ineligible, you should be able to see why. Next slide, please. All right, so to summarize what the goodies are under this new waiver, everything we talked about, and some forbearance and deferment time is going to be counted toward public service loan forgiveness, and that's under a certain policy expansions that the administration has announced. So the COVID forbearance of longer than 12 months, forbearance in total of more than 3 years should be applied to your balance. In-school deferment is still not getting credit. Times of default is still not going to get credit. When the forgiveness comes down, so if they announce, hey, you've gotten there, you have 120 proven, you don't need to be employed in public service at the time of forgiveness under the waiver. MOHELA, like I said, will generate a count that you can track and make, you can plan accordingly. And some direct loan borrowers will even get refunds if the recount shows that they've been making payments after their 120th payment. Next slide, please. Something to be aware of, Parent Plus borrowers are shut out of the waiver, which is, I don't know why Parent Plus borrowers are kind of always at the back of the line, but there it is. Be aware of that. However, borrowers who have both Parent Plus debt and non-parent debt can consolidate it together and get waiver benefits as a result of that. I will say as a caveat, there are pros and cons to consolidating plus and non-plus debt that are outside the scope of what we can cover today. So maybe proceed with caution or do a little bit of more research before acting on this. Next slide, please. All right, ending Halloween 2022. The waiver is closed, and what's going to happen after that? So you'll have consolidated, you'll have sent in your employer certification form before then. The time you're credited will remain. So if you're at 99 payments as of the end of the waiver, they're still there, and you're going to plan accordingly for the last 21, for instance. Normal rules will be back in place. So as you go forward in November, you need to remember those 3 qualifying factors, right? Direct loans, qualifying payments, which means get into income-driven repayment to ride out the rest of your term, and qualifying employment, which means not only while earning credit, but also when the loans are forgiven, because that's one of the normal rules of the program that's, again, being waived for now. Next slide, please. All right. Are there any questions about public service loan forgiveness? Oh, and Tony, the $10,000 write-off.
Sure. So there's a couple on that, and then there's a few more on public service loan forgiveness. The $10,000 write-off questions are, if a student has a loan and parent has parents plus loan for that student, are both the parents and the student able to get the $10,000 write-off?
Yes. Yes. And a related question that I've gotten has been, well, if the student was a Pell Grant recipient, does that affect what the parent's write-off is? And the sort of odd answer is the amount of the parent's write-off goes to the parent's undergraduate status of whether they got a Pell Grant or not. But yes, there should be money for both the student and the parent.
Okay, got it. Here's another one about the write-off. I have direct loans and continue to make payments during the COVID reprieve. However, I paid my loans off in October 2021. Is reimbursement for those payments possible?
It looks that way. And this is a really new policy, so it's all of the mechanics are still slightly murky, but it appears that someone who paid off their loans during the COVID forbearance can request whether you request to have those the $10,000 applied to that, and then you get a check back. You'll want to do some research into how that is supposed to work, but it's definitely on the table.
Now we have some questions about public service loan forgiveness. At what point should I submit my PSLF paperwork? A few months before my 10-year mark, at my 10-year mark, or after?
I usually tell people to certify their employment as they go along. So if you haven't done it yet and you're working in public service, do it now. Do it now. In fact, do it before Halloween, just so you can get the best possible interpretation of your time spent and the payments you've made. And also to bring to a head any problems that may exist. Absolutely do it along the way. I also like to advise people to submit their documents, maybe annually, in order to just make sure that it was Fed loan servicing, but that your servicer has that material and you have that material. You're keeping your documents in your file. But yeah, just as a matter of sort of financial hygiene, do it periodically and definitely before Halloween.
My student loan servicer is Nelnet. Will it change to Mohila?
Yes, yeah. And if you're with Nelnet, that indicates that you're not yet in the program. So by all means, I'd say, get it done within the next month and you will migrate to Mohila, which so far hasn't done anything nefarious. And I'm feeling, pretty optimistic that Mohila can wade through this immense pile of work and capably service the public service loan forgiveness folks.
Does Mohila need to receive the public service loan forgiveness paperwork for previously non-qualifying payments by 10/31?
The consolidation, if it was non-qualifying loans, you need to have addressed that by 10/31. Absolutely, that's drop dead. In terms of employment certification, the guidance is that if the certification form is signed by your employer no later than 10/31, they will process it. But I would say, please don't wait, right? If the website goes down, if for some reason, things are not, I would say just get on it now.
Does my time on maternity leave from my 501c3 count towards public service loan forgiveness?
I'm not sure. Ultimately, I would say, what does your employment certification form say? Is your employer certifying that you were employed during that period? I mean, I don't know what the statute says on that.
If all of my loans are direct loans, and there's 9 except for one, which is FFEL, do I still need to consolidate before I send in my public service loan forgiveness paperwork?
Unless your FFEL loan is minuscule, I don't see any downside to consolidating now, so that you can roll that into the forgiveness count.
Is there a way to pre-certify that my employer is a qualifying employer before the 10-year mark?
For sure. Two things to do. Number one is the Department of Education's help tool, which is on the studentaid.gov website. I'm sorry. Invites you to put in your employer's EIN. And then if the employer is known to the studentaid.gov folks, they'll say right there, oh, this is a qualifying employer. And even if not, if it's a 501c3, it certainly should be. So that's the first thing is try to just run it through the student loan help tool and find out whether it pops up as like green light. The other way you're going to do it is by getting your employment certification form, sending it in right now, right as soon as you got it, and you'll get something back you'll be migrated to Mohila, and then Mohila should send you something or allow you to look at your online interface to see whether they're deeming this to be these payments to be qualifying payments. But if you're with a 501c3, I'd be optimistic that you're well on track. Yes.
If I go down to part-time work from my 501c3, can I still be in public service loan forgiveness if I go back to full-time later?
Right. That's a great question. These do not have to be continuous payments. So you can stop for any reason. You can travel the world for a year, come back and pick up where you left off. So yes, if you're doing part-time work, those are not going to be qualifying months because you're not, at the full-time 30 hours a week or more benchmark. But absolutely, stop, start, for sure.
Got it. And you answered, the next question was on that, so that's great. Let's see here. Will those who didn't finish their degree still get this relief?
Yeah, it's tied to the loan and the employment, and not to any particular educational achievement.
So if we received mail from Mohila, we can confirm we are good to go and in the program?
Excuse me. Darn cold. I would say log into Mohila and look at their the information available under your login, and it should say how many months of credit they're giving you. And again, it might not show everything you think should be there, so make sure they're counting some, and then keep an eye on it over the next few weeks.
How would this work for those who are with Navient and have already consolidated?
Sorry. So you've got consolidated direct loans. Once you send in your employment certification form, that triggers the DOE to know that you need to be with Mohila. They'll migrate your loans over there, and you'll get a letter that's like, welcome to Mohila, we're your servicer now. And then Mohila should start doing those counts. I can't imagine how many employees they have doing the counts because it's a crush right now, but they are doing the hard work of getting people's numbers put into their system.
Do we contact previous employers' HR to ask to have forms certified?
Yes, yeah. So hopefully, for most folks, it'll be palatable to ask for certification from previous employers. There's some guidance about how to deal with the situation where your previous employer is no longer in existence, or you just don't feel like you can go there for whatever reason. But I think that would be something to Google outside the scope of this presentation. So there are definitely ways to prove that prior employment.
So for the relief, I think this is the $20,000 relief. If I have less than $20,000 in loans and was a Pell Grant recipient, how can I apply for this?
Just a second. There. Oh.
You're still on mute.
How about now?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay, we don't yet have specific instructions on how to apply for the $10,000 or $20,000 relief. So I would say, what I would say is apply for the subscription. There's a subscription service through the Department of Education. I believe it's at studentaid.gov, where they're going to be sending out announcements to people who are on that subscription. I'd say get online for that so you get an email in your inbox when they launch the application process. But they're promising it will be in early October, so that's right around the corner. And it will be open through 2023.
Got it. And one last question of I believe, so for the relief, if I have less than 20,000 in loans, oh wait, did we just ask that? Sorry, it jumped. Okay, do I start the process for a public service loan forgiveness and then wait to see what the 2022 debt relief will take care of? Or do I choose which one or the other?
You can do both. Yeah, so if you have, $20,000 comes off the top of your balance, great. For some folks, probably for anyone with a huge loan, $20,000 is not actually going to affect the life of your loan because you're going to be dealing with it in other ways, like public service loan forgiveness or IDR discharge or some other program. But it's if there's money on the table, my opinion is you might as well take it. But like I said, the last $10,000 of your loan might not be something you ever actually pay off.
And that's it for the questions as of now.
Thanks. All right, let's gallop through income-driven repayment. This is important because over the past, gosh, it's been around for quite a while, IDR, income-driven repayment. It's been at times poorly implemented, and the communication surrounding income-driven repayment has been spotty, confusing, and inconsistent, which has caused folks not to be able to fully avail themselves of this benefit. Can I have the next slide, please? So income-driven repayment, I'll say IDR if that's okay, and is that okay with our interpreter? IDR? Okay, an IDR plan, I say it's a must if you have a very large loan balance, which results in you getting, if your bill is, send us $1,500 a month, and you say, I can't do that, you're going to control that and get control of your outflow by getting into an income-driven repayment plan, IDR. Or if you want to get PSLF, Public Service Loan Forgiveness treatment on your loans, because as we just learned, qualifying payments means being in an IDR plan. Now, currently in 2022, something called the IDR recount or account adjustment or audit is underway. And this is less boring than it sounds. It's a policy to clean up past implementation and communication failures that operated to the detriment of borrowers. And I just want to start out with the information that discharge or relief under IDR is possible, even though it's not something we see as often as public service loan forgiveness yet. Next slide, please. So if you're, like I said, if you're struggling to make your payment, look at IDR plans rather than using up your forbearances or rather than, going into default, which has all kinds of negative consequences. IDR payments are calculated based on taxable income, with most public benefits excluded from that calculation. The current programs provide for payments that are pegged to between 10% of discretionary income and 20% of discretionary income. IDR is a bit of a paperwork hassle in that it requires recertification of your payment every year, because they want to know if you just got hired, as CEO of Amazon, they want to know that your payment needs to go up. Payments, here's another takeaway, the big one. Your payments under IDR may not pay down your loan. Your payments may not cover interest on your loan. So when you're in these programs, the glasses, the lenses you're going to be wearing are, can I afford this payment? Yes? Okay, that's my objective, right? You're not going to lie awake thinking about, oh, I can't pay off my loan with this payment, because that's true, but we're keeping your finances on track. And so that's the win under this program. That makes sense. Okay, next slide, please. So one of the changes in 2023 that was very recently announced is a new plan. It doesn't even have a name yet. I'm calling it the Biden 5, but who knows what it'll be called. Supposed to be implemented or launched in July 2023-ish. They're promising 5% of disposable income for people to pay on undergraduate loans, graduated up to 10% of disposable income for people with graduate loans. So if you have 50% of one and 50% of the other, you'd have a 7.5% of your disposable income commitment. And getting a little wonky here, but disposable income is also being calculated in a more favorable way. So you'll be allowed to keep a bigger chunk of your income before, and then paying a smaller chunk of what's considered your discretionary income. And keep an eye out, maybe subscribe to that utility I mentioned, because there are going to be more details announced in the future. Next slide, please. So why are we doing this? Why these changes? Like I said, income-driven repayment had implementation problems. And so in 2022, we've got this one-time account adjustment separate from the new payment plan. It's happening now for people with direct loans. So again, here we are back to that direct loan thing. The government, the DOE, is looking at direct loans and taking sort of a new approach to counting up qualifying IDR payments. Because under IDR, after 20 years of payments on undergraduate loans, in most payment plans, the loans are discharged after 25 years of payments on IDR plans. For graduate loans, your loans are discharged. So a more expansive count is very beneficial in that it moves people closer to finishing their commitment under their IDR plan. I hope that makes sense. So the DOE is going to retally these IDR payments, including, and here's what's significant, including pre-consolidation balances. So if you used to have an FFEL loan and then you consolidated, what would have happened normally is that any qualifying payments under your prior loan are extinguished. They don't count anymore. But now they're going to look all the way back to the inception of your loans, way back when you were in undergraduate school or whenever, and count all those payments and bring you closer to forgiveness. And similarly, forbearance time, not in-school deferment, but most forbearance time and most deferment time will be counted. So again, that could bring people years closer to discharge. Time in COVID forbearance similarly will be counted. counted. Next slide, please. So here we go again. If you don't have a direct loan or ed-held loans, that's confusing, you can consolidate now and there's no super rush, but go ahead and get it done. Consolidate now so that you have loans that are in the pipeline for that recount. There's no downside, like I said. New payment counts, unlike how it's been all these years, servicers are going to start telling us where we are in our payment count. So that's a significant upside. Now, time in default won't be counted, like I said, but I talk to people pretty frequently who have loans from the 80s, from the 90s. Folks with older loans who've been dragging them around for decades will definitely benefit from this. And really anyone who found themselves in forbearance over, for a good chunk of their repayment period will benefit from this. Currently, the law is set up so there will be no taxes. There will be no forgiven debt tax on discharged student loans through 2025. And after 2025, legislation will be needed to address that issue. But I am telling people, I'm quite confident that will happen because there are going to be a lot of middle-class voters with a lot to say about this issue as discharge starts to become more of a reality. Next slide, please. All right. So I think we've covered a lot of this, but the IDR direct loan recount will result in credit for any month in any repayment status, any payment made on pre-consolidation loans, forbearance of more than 12 months consecutive or 36 months total on a given loan, and pre-2013 deferment, not including in-school deferment. And I'm not actually sure what they're referring to in terms of the pre-2013 deferment, but there's probably a policy reason behind that. So this could really explode people's balances and move them closer to that 20 or 25 year discharge mark. Can I have the next slide, please? I think that, were you going to talk about deferment and forbearance, Julia? Or was that still me?
Yes, I say unmuted. I can do that.
We have a couple of questions, I think, if it's a good time.
It's a good time.
Okay. I believe you answered this, but just to confirm, are you taxed on the amount forgiven?
Through 2025, there will be no federal income tax on this. Washington State does not tax forgiven debt, so it's not an issue here in Washington. And after 2025, for IDR forgiveness, we will need to have Congress become functional and fix that problem. Public service loan forgiveness is never taxable, but IDR after 2025 could be. What I'm advising people is, look, if you get within shaking distance 5 years of your discharge finish line and the issue hasn't been resolved yet, maybe you want to talk to a tax person about how to sort of accommodate for that. But for most of us who are quite a few years away from the potential for IDR forgiveness, I'm saying let's just take a wait and see approach.
Just on that topic, for the $10,000 to $20,000 write-off, that is also not taxable.
In Washington, that's correct. There is something like 8 states where it's unclear how that's going to shake out, but here we're safe from that.
Okay, when public service loan forgiveness forgives loans after 120 payments, does it forgive unpaid interest?
The whole thing goes away. You're zeroed out. You pop the champagne.
There's a clarifying question. What does the term discharge mean?
It means the loan is eliminated. So forgiveness is slightly different than discharge, but for the purposes of what we're talking about, it's the same thing. It means you're zeroed out.
Okay, here's one here. Let's see. I did learn that when you go into repayment, you may be able to choose an auto pay, the minimum payment to save a certain percentage of student loan interest. And then a person can make additional payment on top of that monthly if they want. For Aidvantage, who took over some of Navient, this is a 0.25% savings of the student loan interest.
That's great information, especially if your long-term strategy for your student loans is to pay them down to zero. In that case, every penny counts, and minimizing your interest is essential, is a great idea. If your long-term strategy is that this is going to be discharged or forgiven under my public service loan forgiveness in 24 more months, does the amount forgiven really matter? Probably not, but it still is kind of an emotional boost, isn't it, to have lower interest?
There is a request, if you could go back to the new plan for 2023 and what those percentages on disposable incomes mean.
Yeah, so gosh, it's a little bit wonky, and I feel like we should maybe we can put that to the end. So if we have some time at the end, we can kind of dig into those numbers. And maybe I can also send some fact sheets around that could be included in your resources.
Great.
So just to summarize, it's the current plans are 10, 15, and 20% of discretionary income. The new, the Biden 5 plan is supposed to be 5% of your income if you have undergraduate loans, up to 10% based on a weighted average if you have graduate loans. And they're going to calculate disposable income in a slightly more favorable way.
And then there's a question about, has anyone actually made it through forgiveness? Is
yes. Public service loan forgiveness? Yes, so much. Yes, I'm seeing it come down just a lot. And Julia, you probably know people too who have experienced public service loan forgiveness.
Yeah, it was a trickle in the prior administration, and the spigot on that has really widened, and a lot of people are getting relief.
Got it. And then for the question about, is this going to be published? Yeah, it's going to be on Financial Empowerment Network site. It's going to be on the CENTS website, and it can be, linked and shared from there. And I think that's it as far as the questions thus far.
All right, deferment and forbearance. And I'll, to use Latifah's word, we're going to gallop through some of these things to get to more important information. Deferment and forbearance are both options to give a short break from making payments. Deferment is a program you can use to take a short break from making payments if your loans are not in default. Forbearance can be available if your loans are in default. Except interest continues to grow and capitalize on loans in these programs, except for deferment on subsidized federal loans and Perkins loans. You need to request either of these programs from your servicer. They really can be really good for short-term hardship, but they're definitely not a long-term strategy. There are better options for federal loans. So save these two for a rainy day. Next slide, please. And Department of Ed held loans are currently in that COVID pause at 0% interest until December 31st of 2022. And payments are counting towards public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment unless the loans are in default. And all right, next slide, please. So we're going to talk about defaulted loans and the 2022 Fresh Start program. More good news. We love good news. In general, you want, pre-COVID, now, future, you want to avoid default on federal loans. No one's in default right now because of the COVID pause. But as I mentioned earlier, the vast collection powers of the federal government to collect on defaulted loans is big, including up to a 50% can be taken from benefits such as Social Security and Social Security retirement and Social Security disability insurance. And there's no statute of limitations on the collection of federal student loan debt. But again, collection has been suspended and continues to be suspended under the COVID pause until 12/31/22. And Latifah is going to talk about the Fresh Start program, which is great news. Next slide, please.
Right. Okay. Oh, am I? Okay, I'm on. The Fresh Start program is the current administration's way to get people out of that disadvantageous default position that they've found themselves in and segue all those defaulted people into sort of functionality within this system. And so we don't have this entire, universe of people who are sort of on the run from the Department of Education. So let's see, Fresh Start program. Again, these are borrowers whose ed-held federal student loans were delinquent or in default prior to the pandemic. And there are a lot of details to this Fresh Start program, but essentially they're going to automatically, by just the push of a button, I suppose within the mainframe computer somewhere in the sky, they will automatically be returned to a current status when the payment pause ends and payments resume in January 2023. Amazingly enough, delinquencies and defaults will be removed from their credit history. So this could be a substantial benefit for folks who have had, a gaping, default on their credit report for, a part of their adult life. They can now start to move forward financially. So I think this is going to be really beneficial for a lot of folks. It says, according to statistics being released, 10 million federal borrowers will be benefited through this automatic Fresh Start program. Next slide, please. So if that's you, congratulations, this is great. You're not going to default again, right? Once your loans are restored to good standing, you're going to avoid default. Manage your payment outflows through income-driven repayment, which we just discussed, and hopefully that new better payment plan that's going to be rolled out in the next few months can be a way to segue toward the lowest possible payments. And if you really hit a tough spot, sometimes I speak to someone, especially here in the Seattle area where cost of living is really high, and even their IDR payment becomes unmanageable for some period of time, maybe because there's a spike in expenses or something like that. You can, for those sort of Band-Aid moments, maybe seek forbearance, temporary forbearance of 1 to 3 months, for instance. Seek that from your servicer. Someone recently here in our question and answer forum pointed out that for an opportunity to lower interest rates marginally, you can get into auto pay, and also being in auto pay will prevent accidental sort of inadvertent default. Now, default actually happens after 9 months of non-payment. So, even if you get a little behind, it should be possible to get caught back up before you go over the waterfall into full default. But definitely take advantage of this fresh start opportunity. Now, you'll probably notice that we said these are for ed-held loans. If you have loans that for whatever reason don't get the benefit of this fresh start program, you will probably want to take advantage of the sort of the easy way out of default, that's not as easy as fresh start, but through consolidation. Again, consolidation can alleviate a default, get you into a fresh, good standing loan with the Department of Education. So that would be sort of the backup plan if you're in default and for some reason you're not given this on-ramp through fresh start. Next slide, please. Are you borrower defense, Julia, or is that me?
That's you.
Oh, great.
We have
All right.
questions if now's a good time, or
Sure.
wherever you want them. Okay. When one graduates and doesn't need to pay loans for the first year, is this deferment? If so, would this time count towards public service loan forgiveness?
My recollection is that there's usually a 6-month grace, what they call a grace period, during which payments are not required to be made. And I do not believe that that counts for public service loan forgiveness because there's no payment obligation. So those wouldn't count. I don't think there's a way to waive the grace period either, but it would be worth asking.
2 more questions as of now. If a parent passes away while in student loan repayment, are the children responsible for the student loan debt?
That's a great question. So federal student loans, any federal student loan is discharged upon the death of the borrower. So if the borrower is the parent on a Parent Plus loan, the Parent Plus loan is extinguished upon the death of the parent. And actually, as it happens, Parent Plus loans are also discharged if the student for whom the debt was taken passes away.
Is there this is a resource question. Is there someone I can meet with after this to do one-on-one consult? Now, I'm wondering if maybe Stephanie San Pedro, if she does that, or if you know of any other resources.
Stephanie would be a great resource. Julia, do you have anything else to offer?
I'm not able to meet after this for a one-to-one consult, but I think Stephanie would be a great option. We can be emailed.
Yeah, I just don't know. I don't know how busy she is. So in terms of one-on-one, I do one-on-one consultations, but I don't want anyone to think I'm here as a business development effort. This is about getting you information that you can use. But
and I see in the chat that a rep from WASAC has saying, please email them with questions.
Excellent. And so maybe that person could get in touch with me so I can also help get the word out about free resources. Okay.
For IDR with graduate loans, are loans discharged after 25 years?
Generally for graduate loans, it's a 25-year term. Yeah.
My grace period, I graduated in June 2022, is saying late 2023. Are grace periods longer due to the pandemic?
I haven't heard that they are, and I'm wondering whether, I don't know. Actually, that's a great question. I haven't seen any guidance regarding how grace periods are being calculated. I don't know.
Got it. And then regarding the WASAC contact, I'm going to put that in the chat, or Jessica's going to, and I'll say it as well when I get it in the chat, just for someone who wanted that one-on-one question resource. And that's all the questions so far.
Great, great.
Sorry, 1 second. We have it right here. It's in the chat, everybody. And it's loan advocate at wsac.wa.gov.
And do we know
Thanks, Jessica.
whether they can do one-on-one work?
She's saying yes, email us, Jessica Manfredi.
That's phenomenal. That's great.
Loan advocate at wsac.wa.gov.
All right, let's talk about borrower defense. I'm going to speed through it. Generally, borrower defense is a program that looks great. It's been around for quite a long time, but until now, I've been cautious to advise clients to even bother with it in a lot of cases because it's been implemented so sluggishly. But Borrower Defense is a program that is intended to discharge federal loans that were made to attend schools that seriously misled or defrauded their students. They engaged in bad practices like high pressure enrollment, lying to the applicants or the students about job placements, about salaries. All our graduates make $100,000 or more, right? When in fact that is not the case. Credits that won't transfer, so they put in a lot of time working, and then when they go to transfer to the next step of their education, they fall flat and can't do so. Lies about the cost, lies about financial aid, a whole raft of problems that were mostly associated with the for-profit school industry. Next slide, please. So the program provides for folks to fill out a fairly lengthy application explaining the circumstances of their situation and provide evidence if they have it. In the past, these applications would languish for years, literally years, and then eventually, once there was kind of a giant log jam, and then a couple of years ago, and I think early 2020 or 2019, suddenly there was a huge flood of processing where everyone was denied. So it was a program with a lot of problems. And in 2020, there was a class action filed to demand more appropriate treatment of these applications under the program. Next slide, please. So in 2022, there have been a number of, or 2021 and 22, I should say, there have been a number of improvements in the way victims of fraud schools have had their federal loans treated. There have been automatic discharges en masse for people who attended ITT institutes, Corinthian colleges, which is a whole a consortium with a number of different schools under that name, Westwood colleges, and these loans are just going to be zeroed out on people's accounts. So for a lot of people, this is going to be really beneficial. Next slide, please. And in last summer, a few months ago, the class action, which came to be called Sweet versus Cardona, was settled, or a settlement was negotiated, which is intended to result in relief for students of over 150 for-profit schools who have applied or who had applied by that time for a borrower defense to repayment. And so if they had their applications in and they were associated with these certain schools under the settlement, those debts would be eliminated. For folks who had not yet applied or who had attended different schools not on that long list, what the settlement promises is faster processing for those victims of scam schools. So the settlement is a little bit stalled. There's some kind of like the balance write-off. We're a little concerned that it could be scuttled one way or another, but what we know for sure is that the Department of Education is taking a much broader and more borrower-friendly approach to borrower defense requests. What does that mean? That means if you've already applied, you can feel quite optimistic that this debt is going to be forgiven, eliminated. It would be tax-free. And what it also means is that students who attended for-profit schools who feel they were misled but have not yet applied, this is a good time to tell your story in an application and submit it, because it will be reviewed by people working for this administration who are more open to granting relief. The application is at studentaid.gov. Next slide, please. Oh, disability discharge. That's Julia.
All right, so one of the advantages of having a federal student loan are several discharge options, one of which is a total and permanent disability discharge. There increasingly through the last, say, 8 years, more pipelines and ways to qualify for this discharge have opened up. So with a total and permanent disability discharge, one way to sign up and get the discharge and access it is having a healthcare provider sign off on a total and permanent disability form available on my favorite website, studentloanborrowerassistance.org, or the Department of Ed website, or a veteran who is unemployable due to a service-related condition. There is this other pipeline to access the total and permanent disability discharge. And actually, that pipeline has become been more automatic since 2019. Again, more information on that is available on those websites, as well as folks who are on SSI or SSDI and have a finding of disability from the 5 to 7 year review. Again, more details are on those websites. But now, instead of just one way, the first one I talked about, there are these 3 ways to be eligible for this disability discharge. Next slide, please. Yes, there have been some really good changes to this program. They're trying, since folks who are on Social Security or a disabled veteran in the VA, they're really trying to sync up the records and identify folks who might be eligible for this default. But still important to affirmatively go to the website and look at how to qualify. Next slide, please.
And Julia, I'm going to pipe in and harken back to the beginning, and when we learned that 23% of people with federal loans are 50 and over. What I've found is that for some of us who are looking toward retirement, and our non-earning years are looming, having disability discharge in your pocket is not a bad idea. Because if you know that you're going to be paying these until you're 85 or whatever the number is, there's a pretty decent chance that between now and the age of 85, you will become sufficiently enfeebled that your doctor might agree that you're not going back to the workplace. And at that point, disability discharge can be invoked to extinguish tax-free your federal student loans.
Great tip.
Oh, right, and it looks like we're down to our last 10 minutes-ish, Julia. So let's try and I think we can get through our materials, and then I don't mind staying after a little to answer questions. I don't know how you feel about that.
I have a little bit of time, but can't stay too long. All right, we'll gallop through private student loans. Next slide.
Can I do a quick announcement? For those, sorry to interrupt, for those who have to jump off, if you wouldn't mind checking out our survey, that information is really important to us. If you don't mind filling that out when you can. So please consider that. Thank you, and back to you, Julia.
All right, private student loans, as I mentioned, are about 20% of all loans. We've already talked about the differences from federal loans. Really important in general to try to get federal loans first before resorting to private loans if you can avoid it. The one positive thing about them is that unlike federal student loans, which are collectible forever, the statute of limitations does apply on the collection of private student loans. So there is an end date. And the bad news about both is both are really presumed non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. Next slide, please. Private loans, as I mentioned, are often indicated by cosigners. And a cosigner, folks should know that when you cosign a loan, you are equally liable on the repayment of that loan as the primary borrower. So even if everyone goes in with the best intentions of repayment, if you're co-signing a loan, you really need to co-sign and expect that you will be paying back too. Anything can happen, and we often see co-signers held liable, even though everyone thought, that the primary borrower was going to be able to pay. If that doesn't happen, you will be treated as though you are the primary borrower. So it's just really important to know that going in. And you can be pursued if the primary borrower stops paying or dies. All right, please, next slide, please. All right. If you experience private loan problems, they might have a forbearance or interest-only payments. They're really not forced to have these kinds of workout arrangements. If you can't make the payments, you'll likely face debt collection and might get sued. You want to know your rights, understanding debt collectors, and actually, Jennifer, a really great resource to add here is WashingtonLawHelp.org. We have lots of it. It's a site Northwest Justice Project hosts, but it's a co-production of many organizations. And there are really helpful publications on how to deal with debt collectors and answer a lawsuit for debt collection, among many areas of law that are covered on there. I look and use that all the time. And if you get sued, you want to address it. Don't ignore it. and get legal assistance as quickly as possible. And next slide, please.
Julia. Yeah, cosign on that. I am hearing that private lenders are starting to ramp up their debt collection efforts. So it's not the end of the world, but you do need to know your rights and, be proactive if there's if a lawsuit is filed against you. Student loan borrower assistance is a good resource for at least that will lay out here's how it's going to go down, and you need to be, ready for whatever happens. And I wish we had some more time to talk about private loans here today, but that's where we're leaving it. I'm going to talk about something that comes up when clients ask me about their student loan strategies. What about refinancing their federal student loan? Well, refinancing student loans. I don't tell people not to refinance student loans, but I say proceed with caution. Generally speaking, I don't recommend refinancing out of the federal loan system. Sometimes people say, well, but I'm paying 8% interest on my federal loans, and this private lender is willing to give me a loan for 3%. There's a significant delta there. Well, I won't say don't take that, but I will say be really careful to understand what you're giving up. You're giving up, most likely, income-driven repayment, public service loan forgiveness, disability discharge, death discharge, and all that raft of other benefits. So from there, as long as you've run the numbers and gotten comfortable with that, do as you see fit.
I just would say proceed with caution. Read the fine print. I agree, but generally a bad idea to refinance out of a federal loan. But there are certain circumstances where it might be wise.
Yeah,
for sure.
Now, if you have private student loans and you can find a better interest rate or better payment terms, if you can refinance into a vehicle where you don't have a cosigner and thereby eliminate a source of friction in your family, by all means. But again, understand what you're doing. Proceed with caution and do seek help if you're unsure. So that's all I have to say about refinancing. Next slide, please. This
all right.
Fertile ground right now. We've been saying for years, beware of scams and frauds. And I think now more than ever, with all the confusion and all the amazing actual programs out there, there are going to be some really smart and wily fraudsters out there. And Julia, if you have anything to say on this, jump in.
In the chat, I'm posting in the chat a cut and paste from the studentaid.gov site. What their guidance is on scams, about loan discharges, anyone who's trying to charge you a fee, beware for things you can do for free, and who they send emails from and what addresses they send from. There are lots of, particularly on social media sites, presidential administration, relief. So just be very, very wary. Scams are up all over the place, particularly for seniors. Phone calls, texts, call now, loan forgiveness. They're posing as any number of federal government agencies. So, report suspected scam to the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission. Check the websites before of the federal agency a supposed offer is coming from, and just be very, very careful. Next slide. And is that the last slide?
Yeah, I think we're ready for questions, and I can stay after a bit, and I think Julia can.
All right, and I'll just add on the scam thing is a lot of scams can be prevented if you verify who you're talking with, these imposter scams. So independently verify, email addresses, phone numbers, things like that. Okay, so back to the questions. I submitted my employee verification by snail mail for public service loan forgiveness more than a month ago and haven't heard anything back yet. Everything else has been completed for public service loan forgiveness. Is there anything I can do while I wait? I'm getting nervous as October 31st gets closer.
Right. Sorry. If you're already with MOHELA, then that means at least we're not worrying about that that drop dead deadline for consolidating of October 31st. If you have a copy of the document you submitted, the signed employment certification form, if it were me, I might fax it also and keep my proof of faxing. I know that they're completely overwhelmed because of all the people who are rushing to take advantage of this excellent program. So, I mean, can we ask, do you have the form still, a copy of it?
Yes, I do still have my form, so that's a good tip. Thank you.
The fax number is somewhere in our materials here.
Okay,
Right.
next question. What are some rules if the loan is under the parent and the child is disabled after he attended school?
Right. I looked into this for someone. There is not disability discharge for if the student becomes disabled. That is a huge policy problem, and it leaves you in a pickle. If you become discharged, you can get your disability discharge, but I'm afraid that there is not relief in that situation.
All right, moving on here. So far, I think, let's see, that could be it. So I'll just remind everyone to please take the survey. It's in the chat. The videos and materials will be made available after the presentation. I want to once again thank Julia and Latifa for such an amazing presentation, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us. Do Jennifer or Debbie have any closing comments beyond that?
Thank you,
No,
everyone.
just ditto.
who's
It's
stuck-
been amazing.
Yeah, I was
Sorry,
going to say
Jennifer, I
thank you to
didn't see you
everyone.
unmute.
Thank you to everyone who stuck around for the hour and a half plus. It's lovely to see you all. Thank you, Latifa and Julia. This has been so much really valuable information. We'll get an email out soon. I've been diligently taking notes of resources, and so we will get that all out very soon to you. And the recording will come out as soon as we have it available. Check your spam folder because sometimes the emails coming out of our system land there, but they'll be coming soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.